Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Catherine Bonin, and what a pleasure it is to be here today with you to share a story instead of a reading. I'm coming to you today from Big Sky, Montana, where Reverend Larrye and I have enjoyed a week of a wonderful retreat. So here we go. There was a woman by the name of Frances, and she was of a certain age, driving home to St. Louis from Atlanta, where she had been spending some time with her grandkids. As she was driving, she was reminiscing about the wonderful time they had together, all the things they got to do, and how she might not be able to see them again soon. So she wanted those memories to be seared in her heart and in her mind. And without thinking too much, she was driving along, and all of a sudden, boom, she heard a loud noise, and her car started shaking. So she pulled over to the side of the road. Oh my goodness, she thought, what am I to do? And she didn't know anything about cars. So it was starting to rain, and she wasn't sure what to do, but she knew that if she got out of the car, she tried to flag down a car, someone would probably stop to help her. So that's exactly what she did. She took out her umbrella, and she stood by the side of the road, waiting for a car to come by that she could flag down. Well, about a half hour passed, and not one car came by. A few minutes later, here comes an old Pontiac sputtering, and it's the person in the car saw that she was having some trouble as she was waiting, so he pulled over. As he got out of the car, that Pontiac continued to sputter. This gentleman walked up towards Frances, and she started to get scared because it was getting dark and it was raining, and he had a very old car. He was pretty dirty. He looked kind of poor, so she wasn't sure if she was going to be safe there. But she thought no one else had stopped to help, so she better at least give this guy a chance. So he came up to her and he asked her what was happening, and she told him that she wasn't sure, but there was a big bang and the car was shaking. Well, he told her to get in the car where it was warm and dry, and he would check things out. He said, by the way, my name's Brian. He laid down on the ground and he checked things out, and all Frances had was a flat tire. So Brian got up and got the spare out of the trunk and the jack and jacked up the car, cutting his hands up some in the process, changed the tire, and right about the time he was finished, Frances rolled down the window and said, it was so nice of you to stop and help me. What can I pay you? And Brian said, oh, you can't pay me anything. This is not a job. This is just helping someone in need. He's looked at her and he said, if you want to pay me anything, the next time you see someone in need, just help them. And remember me, think of me as you're doing that. Well, Frances thought that was very kind, and Brian sat there on the side of the road as he watched Frances and her Mercedes pull away before he turned around to head home. Well, a few miles down the road, Frances saw an old diner on the side of the road, so she pulled over, thinking she'd get something warm to eat for that last leg of her trip. She walked in the diner, and there wasn't anybody in there. It was old and dingy. There was an old cash register right next to the door, and she thought that cash register was kind of like the telephone of an out-of-work actor, one that didn't ring very often. Well, she thought, I've got to have something to eat, so I'll sit down. And she heard from the back, sit down anywhere you like, I'll be right out. So she took a table, and a few minutes later, the waitress came out with a dry cloth to help her wash off the rain from her hair and from her face. She had a cup of coffee, and so Frances was very happy. The waitress told her that the special of the day was chili, so Frances decided she'd have chili for dinner. She had her chili, and she was watching that waitress, who was moving around kind of slowly because she was at least 8 months pregnant, and she had to have been there all day long. Frances could also tell that she was worn out and kind of tired, and probably also pretty poor. Her uniform was dirty and tattered, and there wasn't anybody else in the restaurant. Well, as Frances finished her chili, she thought about Brian, and she thought this might be an opportunity for me to pay that good and that help forward. So when the waitress came with the check, Frances gave the waitress a $100 bill. The waitress stood there for a moment and said, let me check in the back and see if I have change. So she went into the back, and while she was gone, Frances left. And the waitress came out, and Frances' car was pulling away. The waitress held those $87 in her hand, and she thought, wow, that's the biggest tip I've ever gotten. That was so kind of her. And as she went to clear off the table, she noticed a napkin with some writing on it. So she picked it up, and under the napkin, 4 more $100 bills. And the writing on the napkin said, someone helped me when I was in need. If you want to pay me back, help someone else who could use your support. Well, the waitress started to cry, but there were tables to clear and dishes to wash and salt shakers to fill, and she was getting pretty tired. So she just said a quiet thank you to that woman as she left the diner. And she was driving home thinking about Frances and how kind it was for her to help her and how much that money was going to mean, because the baby was coming and they didn't have a crib or diapers or all those things they needed. But when she got home, she saw her husband laying there on the bed, and she thought, he's going to be so happy with this money. He's been worried about how we're going to take care of the baby and buy the diapers and the formula and all the things that we need. She said, I can't wait. She thought, I can't wait to tell him in the morning. So she leaned over and she gave him a kiss on the cheek, and she said, everything's going to be all right, Brian. I love you.